speakers who are part of the project. So what is Behind the Veil, or BTV for short? So Behind the Veil is a leadership series that examines how women of color develop and sustain their capacity to create meaningful change, especially within the nonprofit social justice sector. The aim of Behind the Veil is to understand how aspiring and established leaders use strengths such as emotional intelligence, intuition, faith and spirituality, power, health, ethics to help them in their leadership journeys. So as we are here today, all of the Behind the Veil leaders are current and former executive directors, founders or funders of non-justice, social justice, nonprofit organizations. So I would like you guys to listen and engage with our speakers and also be inspired as well. This is the third of our Behind the Veil project here at the app, and we'll have two more, one next Thursday and the Thursday after that as well. So April 5th and April 12th. So I hope you guys keep coming back and learning and engaging. So yeah, here they are. We have those speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Iyanu. My name is Latanya Slack, and I'm going to be facilitating and moderating the panel for today. I'm a senior lecturer in government here at CMC, and I'm honored that we're able to have these guests here today to talk about their leadership journeys, as Iyanu just said. So we'll have a panel discussion and talk amongst ourselves for a little bit, and then we'll open it up as tradition for you all to ask questions after a little bit. And so feel free to, think of all the interesting things you want to ask them while we're talking. Okay. All right. So let's start with some introductions. 3 executive directors and executive leaders here with us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves, like, what organization you're from, where, what you do, just sort of the brief 411 about who you are and your relationship to your organization. Evelyn?
Okay, great. Thanks, Latanya. It's an honor to be here, especially with these amazing women, all including Latanya, who I've known for a long time. So my name is Evelyn Chen. I'm the executive director of Forward Together. I've been the executive director for around 18 years. We started when it was very small. But our organization is a multiracial national organization. We have about 28 staff and in 6 cities. And we work at the intersection of race, gender, and sexuality. So we work on multiple issues, including reproductive justice, where we have these roots. Our main purpose is to unite communities, to fight for rights, resources, and recognition so that women and families can thrive. And we center and amplify the leadership of women of color, non-binary folks of color, and indigenous women to be able to make changes in their communities and to make changes in this country that reflect what our communities look like and what they need.
Hi, I'm also really happy to be here with Evelyn and Latanya, who I've known for a long time, and I would have just met recently. My name is Laura Jiménez. I'm the executive director at California Latinas for Reproductive Justice. We're based here in Los Angeles, but we're a statewide organization that does reproductive justice, advocacy, community engagement, and community-informed research, specifically around the Latinx populations of the state. And we're not national, but we are also looking at sort of like the national impact that the work that we do has, right? Especially being in California, we've been able to do some proactive things, but still knowing the conditions and the circumstances of our communities here and the needs that still exist. So we really work on building Latina power and developing leadership. We have 11 staff, but we'll be growing shortly. This year we're hiring right now. And I'm not a founder. I've been with the organization for almost 7 years now, but I've been in reproductive justice work for 24 years. And throughout California, and then I also moved out of the state for 12 years. I did some work in New York and also Atlanta, Georgia.
And hello everyone, I'm Aurea Montes-Rodriguez. I'm Executive Vice President at Community Coalition. in South Los Angeles. We're a social justice organization that was founded to deal with the impacts of the crack epidemic. We're about 40 staff strong, and I've been there for 20 years. I grew up in South Los Angeles, and I never thought that I would be at any one place for 20 years. I practically grew up in the organization since I arrived there right before I started my Master's in Social Welfare program. And our organization focuses on involving everyday people in looking at the root causes that led to the crack epidemic, and building out action policy campaigns to deal with issues that are really pressing to African American and Latino residents, including young people growing up in the community. So we work on issues of public safety, of criminal justice, to strengthen the safety net. And we use community organizing as our main strategy. We also are engaging about 40 to 60,000 new or occasional voters to do education around the importance of state tax and fiscal reform. And we use the arts and culture to really bring in folks who would not otherwise get involved in organizing and civic engagement work. And you know, I'm having a really proud moment at 20 years in the organization because I got to travel with a delegation of about 34 to the March for Our Lives event in DC and rally. And one of our young persons, Edna Chavez, was the second speaker with all of those incredible young people. And when I think about what brought me to Community Coalition, it was because I wanted to start a youth organization that could ensure that all young people in South LA would have an opportunity to go out to college and have the opportunities that I was afforded by my community during the height of the crack epidemic, which is when I was a teenager in South LA or South Central LA.
Thank you. All right, so those are your organizations and what you do, but we're here to talk about, you know, who you are and how you got to where you are. What is it about your leadership journey? What have you learned? So tell me, as a woman of color, how do you think about leadership? And have you thought about leadership differently than you think maybe some of your peers have? Evelyn, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, we were just having a conversation before this panel about how, you know, in this country there's a specific type of leadership style that gets recognized and rewarded, right? And that leadership in terms of identity often is associated with white, cis, male, upper middle class identities, able-bodied, right? And then there's certain qualities, right, in terms of that kind of leadership. A person who's very good at public speaking, who's very charismatic, who is comfortable standing up in front of crowds, and who leads in the front. And so, you know, for me, and I think for a lot of folks here on the panel, but for women of color, leadership is, there's lots of different ways that we lead. And there's lots of ways that they're just as important as, and make sometimes even more impact doing the work that is not necessarily fitting that kind of that role and those identities. And so I think that what happens is if we don't recognize that there's other forms of leadership, one, we squash them before folks can even kind of emerge as leaders, right, and take on that, and our communities lose from that, and our society loses from that. But also that there's a lot of unrecognized leadership that we, if we don't recognize that there's ways in which folks burn out, they are under-resourced. There's a way also in which people want to leave leadership because they're not being recognized. And so I think that what I'm trying to do, and Latanya and I were talking about how do we think about leadership from a place of strength and abundance, and also, you know, connected to our values, and our passion, and to be able to really make a space for all kinds of leaders to be able to, that we want a movement that is leaderful and not just having one or two folks kind of representing all of us. So I'll stop there. I know you all have a lot to say.
Well, I think you're going to probably hear the same response on being leaderful, or what we at Community Coalition really value and uplift, which is collective leadership. And I know for me, part of why I think I've been at Community Coalition for so long is because our founder really said that celebrity-style leadership was problematic, and that if we believed in social and racial justice, we really had to look at our movements of the past and what happened to our communities when our great leaders, like Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, even more recently Cesar Chavez, right, when they died, it just left entire communities really feeling like they didn't have enough of a direction. And so our founder, Karen Bass, really believed that we had to cultivate the leadership of the masses, and that to do that, it meant that leadership meant that we had to be willing to do the hard work of organizing, the hard work of studying and learning issues, the hard work of really training residents and young people to be the spokespersons for the issues that they wanted to take on and address. And for me, that has been critical and central to the way that I approach not just my work, but my life, and my upbringing of my children. We don't look for them to be the best. We don't look for them to strive for perfection. I actually encourage them to make mistakes. I encourage them to, work in teams and to help other classmates that are struggling, or that, to go ahead and fail. That all of that is okay, and that's a part of really building leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say mostly what they said. And I think, for me, just when I became the executive director, before I became the executive director, it took me a very long time to decide to actually apply to try to become the executive director of this organization. Because I was like, I am not an executive director. I have no interest in being an executive director, because what I was responding to was what I was told was leadership, which was somebody who likes to stand up and talk loud and have everybody see them and be the person. And also I was responding to sort of things that I had seen in leaders that I did not like, which is the way that the power dynamics that exist in an organization, and the ways that power can be used against other people. And I didn't want any part of that. So it took about 3-4 months for people to convince me that I should. And I kept saying, nope, not an executive director. No. So I think when I don't know, a year, 2 years after I became executive director, I started to just really see, like, okay, I can do this how I want to do it. I can be an executive director. I can be a leader the way that is comfortable for me. And also, I needed to learn to push myself in certain areas, and I think what that was about, and what it still is about, is like, how do I leverage this sort of capital that I have with relationships I built, or the fact that foundations are looking at the executive director a certain way, or the media is looking at the executive director a certain way. How do I leverage that for the good of the organization, or the communities that we're working with, or the younger leaders in the organization? How do I model that to them, right? And also to my children. And I think as we started preparing for this project, I was talking one day to my husband and my younger daughter, and I was like, what do you think would be interesting to, people want to know about my leadership? And my younger daughter was like, well, I think it's really interesting that what you do, you share with us, and you share with us, my daughters, right? And you also share with our friends. So there's this whole sort of like little ripple effect where they've been around these folks for their entire lives. So they're like reproductive justice, they know all about it. But also, so my 13-year-old right now is working on a project on microaggressions in her middle school in Burbank because she recently had to come up against a student who was being racist to another student. And they're just questioning, and they're learning how to be in their leadership the way they're comfortable, and the way that makes them feel powerful, makes them feel like they're doing something important.
So you talked about, being an executive director, and it took you a while to get into it. And, 2 or 3 years later, you figured out, okay, I can do this the way I want to. Before you became an executive director, there's maybe something in your background or in your life that maybe sort of identify that you were a leader, right? And share with us, if you will, if there's something that, was really kind of an indication to you that you were a leader, right? That you had these elements, these aspects of yourself that would eventually lead you to where you are now. Is there anything in the background? Anybody?
So, for me, in doing this process and thinking, I had 2 reflections. One was that when I was a child, my mom came to this country with my older brother and me after my father died, and she didn't know how to speak English, and we didn't know how to speak English, but as soon as we were done with our first year of school, whenever we had interactions with the English-speaking community, my mother would ask me to interpret what she needed to communicate, and also in really difficult situations when she felt like an injustice was being done to either of us, meaning my brother and me, she would say, "You tell this person that I'm saying this." And I was in 2nd grade, and I'd breathe and I'd say, "My mom is saying," in my broken English. So for me, that really came up of like my mother's both courage of coming to this country with 2 children after losing her husband and leaving her entire family behind, and the context that created for me in terms of the importance of speaking up, and then the second part was in high school. UCLA students were doing a hunger strike because they wanted to get the university to build a Chicano Studies department, and this was back in '93, and I was a high school student, and I learned about this, and I organized our students, our student body, to participate in a march from Aurea Street to UCLA, which was about 15 to 17 miles, I don't remember, but in that range. And when I had to get up and say to students why we had to do this, I really remember that as a moment of like pride when they won the Chicano Studies department at UCLA, and thought about my role in that.
When I was in, I think,
Yes, sparked in my memory was, I think my first sort of feeling of being in leadership was when I was an undergraduate at UC San Diego, and we were working on, we were arguing with the administration around trying to have a cross-cultural center established. And so I was like in that last part of school where I think I didn't have very many classes, so I was just also like, I had more time to do other things that were interesting to me, and so I came into leadership with some other students of color there, and it was kind of like exhilarating, even though my natural preference is not to to just do the behind the scenes stuff. I'm very happy to do that. So it was exhilarating, and it was exciting to feel like we were challenging something that challenging the sort of the power structure to get what was needed by our community in the university, and then to be successful in that was exciting. So I think, starting there, and then I slip back into my normal, where I like to be, but but it exists in there and it comes out when I want it to.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my first memory of leadership is actually in college. So I had signed on to be an intern at the Women's Center at UC Davis, where I went to school. And I got the opportunity to actually coordinate a multiple UC-wide women's conference. And it went really well. We had, I brought together a group of folks, like an organizing committee, and then we brought in like 35 speakers, and I got to think about the vision of the conference, which was forging bridges across difference, right? So, and intersectionality. I brought in Cherie Moraga, who, I don't know if you read This Bridge Called My Back a long time ago, but just, those folks really influenced my, my thinking and my leadership to this day. And so really, so that was really great. And I think the moment that I realized that I had leadership, but also the role of a leader is actually in the evaluation. And so I brought together this group of folks after the conference to do the evaluation, and it went really well, but there were also mistakes, like there were things that we didn't do well. And in the evaluation, I just focused on the stuff that didn't go well. I was like, oh, we should have done that, and I'm so sorry. Like there was a speaker that I was supposed to pick up, and then I was late, and then that person was late. And I just, the whole meeting had this like tenor of it was depressed, like the morale went, I just saw the room, the energy of the room went down, and the morale was bad, even though the event was really successful. And I remember ending it, and a few people came up to me and said, why didn't you focus on things that, worked well? And I thought, oh, that was my role. Like that, I'm supposed to hold the whole picture, and because I was so worried about the mistakes that I, had made, or that the things that didn't go well, I just focused on that small piece of the pie, and it affected how other people felt about it. And before, I think I would have been like, well, other people, why didn't they just step in and, but they were looking to me. So I think that was something that I have taken with me ever since. It's like, so whenever you do an evaluation, make sure that you hold the big picture. And that as a leader, that is our job, is to see not only kind of the whole picture, but what's ahead, so that we can kind of keep building towards what we're building towards.
So, outside influences, people talk about the importance of having mentors, coaches, role models. Who are your early role models, and what did you learn? Because it strikes me that there aren't a lot of people who've done what you've done for a long period of time before this. There are not very many social justice, women of color leaders in the United States, at least, that have been around for a long time. So who are your role models? If anybody.
For me, it really was seeing my mother work as hard as she did to figure out a country that was new to her, and seeing her navigate and build a community that extended beyond our family, because our family wasn't here. So like really relying on neighbors, really relying on people in formal places like teachers to kind of inform and share with her, what school as a system worked like, and how the school system worked. And so for me, like really seeing her figure everything out, and not being afraid to ask for help, I think she probably has been my constant mentor, and the person that I look up as someone that I admire. And then my teachers, like there were a number of teachers when our schools were being criminalized, especially during my middle school years, where we were being told that they were going to install metal detectors because they were worried that we were bringing in guns or weapons and drugs. And it was a time of all of the zero tolerance policies. And our teachers would say, are you going to put up with that? Are you going to stand for that? And they were mostly Black teachers. And so for me, they became really critical in shaping my world outlook, because by them asking the questions, it allowed us to really think about, is this fair? Not knowing anything larger, but what was being presented to us. So my teachers.
I think I would say my parents, and I would say that because I think they provided the space for me to be self-reflective and to get to know myself and to think about how, how would I do things differently? What does it mean to be principled and to be honest and to have integrity in your work? And I think that in our community, sometimes we don't always have that. There's not anybody holding that space of like, there being safety and there being, a sense of security to really be able to do that reflection, right? And I think that's been really important for me and has been part of my development as a leader, is my ability to be aware of myself and where I'm at in each of the moments of work that I'm doing, and it has an important effect on how I do the work. And I think also, particularly in college, really the women of color professors that were supportive of myself, of other young women of color that were on the campus, and just really seeing that there was this other piece of leadership, and unfortunately it's the piece that tends to not be acknowledged and not be valued, which would and I think often comes to the detriment of their careers when you are this person of color, this woman of color. And I just remember there were all the students coming because they, emotionally, spiritually, academically, whatever, economically, financially, right? They were stressed and struggling. We were stressed and struggling, and so them just being there and listening, and again, kind of like holding a space, even if it wasn't one that was like total, feeling of security. You're still stressed, but there was a person that was holding that and sort of helping process what was going on and saying, it's going to be okay. And I know that often comes to, especially in academia, where there's a pressure to publish, to do certain things, right? When that other labor has to also be valued as well, right? Because those are the people that are getting us through the institution. And so I think seeing that also has allowed me to feel like that natural part of myself, because that is a part of who I am, is an okay part, is a good part of my leadership, and is important and critical to the work that the organization does or that the movement does.
Yeah, I really resonate a lot with what you both have said. My parents, I was very fortunate in that I have a brother, and my parents, I didn't get a lot of really overt messages about gender roles. And so they gave, I grew up thinking that I'm the oldest too, so of course I'm gonna get everything that my younger brother, has, every opportunity. But I do feel like that just not having to deal with kind of gender oppression in my immediate families was kind of instrumental in my just commitment. And then growing up as one of the few Asian American families in the town that we grew up and facing racism, I was very hyper vigilant around injustice. And my family as immigrants from China coming over here, would tell their values, they kept me thinking about what's important. It's like family is the most important thing, and you can lose, practically everything else, but if you have family, that's what's the most important. And so it kind of gave me that thing of don't sweat the small stuff kind of thing, even when I was younger. And then I think that this whole thing around when I went to college, there was a peer counseling center there that students could be a part of, and it was intensive training to become a peer counselor. And it was the first time that I learned about a lot of different issues and how to listen deeply to people, and also the self-reflection piece that I think is so important. That I think one of the things, I think what makes a great leader is the ability to self-reflect and to continue to grow and evolve, and because you want to bring your best, right? And things are changing, and none of us knows everything, even as seasoned as you may be in your whatever 60s, 70s, or whatever. A young person can bring just as much too, and we all have things to learn from each other. And so I think that has really the value of or the commitment to self-growth to evolving on a personal level where we are not only not doing no harm with our leadership, but we're able to kind of bring a very positive, we're able to grow other folks and other leaders as we move forward.
Great, thank you. All right, so I want to turn it to the audience and see what questions they have. We don't have microphones, so just, raise your hand and then we can go from there. Yes.
What's a piece of advice that you would give to young girls that identify themselves as a person of color?
I think I would say it's really important to trust your gut, to trust your instincts. I think often we get told that, things that are not okay are okay. And so I think, if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. And on your own self-reflection, like what is it you need to do about it, or who needs to do something about it, who needs to be aware of it.